The shelter had assured Daniel that Rex was a retired war dog, highly trained, disciplined, and in need of a peaceful home. The scars on the German Shepherd's body told stories of battles fought, missions completed, and enemies subdued. But tonight, as Rex lay in the dark corner of the living room, staring at Daniel with unblinking eyes, something felt off. Daniel shifted uneasily on the couch. He had owned dogs before, but never one like this. There was something about Rex's gaze, intense, calculating. The dog barely moved, only his chest rising and falling in steady, controlled breaths. It wasn't the relaxed posture of a pet settling in. It was the stillness of something waiting, watching, deciding. He tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe Rex was just adjusting to his new home. Maybe it was the years of training, the battles that had conditioned him to be hyper-aware. But then, Daniel noticed something else. Rex wasn't just watching him. His eyes were locked onto Daniel's hands. More specifically, his right hand. A chill ran down his spine. He slowly lifted his hand, flexing his fingers. Rex's ears twitched, his body tensed. The air in the room shifted, thick with silent tension. Then, without warning, Rex lunged. Teeth bared, muscles coiled like a spring. He shot forward with terrifying speed. Daniel barely had time to react as the massive dog launched himself at him. Snarling, eyes burning with something primal. But it wasn't rage. It wasn't aggression. It was something worse. It was recognition. And in that split second before Rex made contact, Daniel realized this wasn't a random attack. Rex knew exactly who he was. The room was silent, but not the kind of silence that brings comfort. It was heavy, pressing, like the air itself was holding its breath. The dim glow of a single lamp cast long shadows across the wooden floor, flickering every so often, as if uncertain whether to stay lit. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, rattling them in their frames. But inside, the only sound was the low, steady breathing of the dog lying in the corner. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. Something about the atmosphere felt wrong. The house was supposed to be a fresh start. Quiet, peaceful, a place to move on from the past. But tonight, it felt like a trap, like something unseen lurked in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And at the center of it all was Rex. The dog hadn't moved in minutes, yet his presence was suffocating. His body was still, but his eyes were alive, calculating, focused. Daniel had never seen a dog watch someone like this before. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't fear. It was something colder, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. A deep, quiet growl rumbled from Rex's chest. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated through the air like a warning. Daniel felt a shiver crawl down his spine. He wasn't afraid of dogs. He never had been. But as he stared into those dark, intelligent eyes, he felt something foreign grip him. Not caution, not unease, fear. And for the first time since bringing Rex home, he wondered if this had been a mistake. Daniel Carter had never been one to believe in omens. He was a man of logic, of reason. A former paramedic, he had spent years responding to chaos, stitching wounds, and saving lives. He had seen tragedy up close, learned to compartmentalize fear, and push forward even in the worst situations. But now, sitting in his dimly lit living room with a war-hardened dog watching his every move, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: pure, unfiltered dread. He had adopted Rex 3 days ago from a military rehabilitation program that placed retired war dogs into civilian homes. The staff had told him Rex was one of the best. Obedient, highly trained, fiercely loyal. A hero, they had called him. But when Daniel had asked about the dog's last mission, the shelter workers had exchanged uncertain glances. Classified, they had said, their voices carefully neutral. Just give him time to adjust. But Rex wasn't adjusting. He was watching, studying. Daniel ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, exhaling slowly. He had taken Rex in because he understood what it meant to carry scars from the past. He knew what it was like to wake up in a cold sweat, heart hammering from nightmares that felt too real. Maybe he and Rex were the same. Two soldiers in different ways, trying to find peace in a world that had long forgotten them. But peace didn't feel possible with Rex in the house. The dog barely slept. He refused to eat unless Daniel left the room. And then there were the stares. Always watching, always analyzing, as if waiting for something. Tonight was the worst. Rex hadn't moved from his spot for nearly an hour. His breathing was steady, his body tense but still, like a coiled spring. And those eyes, sharp, dark, focused, were locked onto Daniel's hands again. Daniel flexed his fingers, shifting slightly in his chair. "You're making me nervous, buddy," he murmured. His voice meant to be lighthearted, but it came out tight. Rex's ears twitched at the sound, but he didn't move. Daniel's stomach twisted. He had treated countless patients who suffered from PTSD, veterans, officers, even paramedics like himself. He had seen the way trauma rewired the brain, how certain triggers could send someone into fight or flight mode. Maybe Rex was just adjusting. Maybe something about Daniel reminded him of his past handler. Or maybe Daniel frowned, his mind catching on a thought he hadn't considered before. What if it wasn't just any memory that was triggering Rex? What if Rex recognized him? His pulse spiked at the idea, irrational but insistent. He had never served in the military, had no connection to war zones or special operations. So why was Rex reacting to him like an enemy? A slow, deep growl rumbled from Rex's throat, and for the first time, Daniel saw something shift in the dog's expression. Not aggression, not confusion, recognition, and that terrified him more than anything. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as the low growl from Rex grew deeper, reverberating through the room. He didn't move, didn't blink. Any sudden motion might set the dog off, and right now, Rex wasn't just watching, he was calculating. Heart pounding, Daniel slowly shifted his hands away from his lap, raising them slightly, palms open, a silent gesture of surrender. "Easy, buddy," he murmured, his voice measured, steady, despite the sweat forming at the back of his neck. Rex's ears twitched, his muscles taut beneath his thick coat. His body language wasn't that of an ordinary dog feeling anxious or defensive. This was something else. It was the stance of a soldier anticipating a threat. Daniel had seen enough tense situations in his years as a paramedic to know when something was about to go south. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to move, to run, but he forced himself to stay still. If Rex wanted to attack, there was no outrunning him. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the moment. Why was Rex acting like this? Why did he seem to recognize Daniel, despite them never having met before? Then, Rex's growl cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was worse. The massive German shepherd's breathing changed, slower, more controlled. His eyes darkened with something Daniel could only describe as certainty. And then, without warning, he lunged. Daniel barely had time to throw himself backward as Rex sprang from his spot, jaws snapping just inches from his face. The force of the movement sent the coffee table skidding across the floor, knocking over the lamp and plunging the room into near darkness. Daniel hit the ground hard, pain jolting up his spine, but he scrambled backward just in time to avoid Rex's second strike. The dog landed where Daniel had been just seconds before, claws scraping against the wooden floor. The sheer power behind the attack was staggering. "Rex, stop!" Daniel shouted, his voice laced with both fear and desperation. The command meant nothing. The dog was locked onto him now, eyes blazing with something Daniel had never seen before. It wasn't blind aggression. It wasn't an attack born out of confusion or fear. It was intentional. Daniel scrambled to his feet, knocking over a chair in his rush to create space. His mind screamed for a plan, an exit, anything. But Rex was already moving again, muscles rippling as he prepared to strike. And then he stopped, just like that. One moment, the dog was a force of nature, pure muscle and fury. The next, he was standing perfectly still, ears perked, eyes still locked onto Daniel. But there was something new in them now. It wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion. It was confirmation. Daniel's stomach twisted violently. He could feel it now. Something deeper than fear, something cold and undeniable. This wasn't random aggression. This wasn't a mistake. Rex knew him, and whatever the dog had been trained to do, whatever instinct had just kicked in, Daniel was the target. His breathing came fast and shallow. He didn't understand. How? Why? He had no military background, no ties to war or classified operations. But Rex wasn't acting on impulse. He was reacting to something real. A thought crept into Daniel's mind, slow and insidious. What if Rex wasn't just any retired war dog? What if he had been trained for something else? The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Rex remained motionless, his body still coiled, ready to spring at any moment. But he was waiting now, waiting for something Daniel couldn't see. Then, in the darkness, something else clicked. A sound, a faint mechanical beep. Daniel's breath hitched. It was coming from his phone, still sitting on the counter where he had left it. The screen flashed once, a notification. Unknown number. One new message. Daniel didn't dare move, but his mind was already screaming. What the hell is going on? His pulse hammered as he carefully, slowly, reached for his phone, eyes never leaving Rex. His fingers trembled as he unlocked the screen. The message was short. "We know who you are." Daniel's blood ran cold. And in that moment, as if the text had been a command, Rex's body tensed. And he lunged again. Daniel barely had time to react. Rex was midair, his jaws wide, his muscles stretched taut like a coiled spring. Daniel dove sideways, his shoulders slamming into the floor as the dog's weight crashed down beside him. Claws scraped against the wood, the sound sharp, grating, primal. He scrambled backward, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. His mind was a blur of adrenaline and panic. Why was this happening? Rex had been calm all day. Reserved, sure, but nothing like this. Now, the dog was hunting him, tracking his every move like a trained assassin. Daniel's shaking hands fumbled for the overturned chair, gripping its leg like a makeshift shield. "Rex, stand down," he commanded, his voice sharp, authoritative. The dog froze, his ears twitched, his breath came in slow, deliberate huffs. For a second, Daniel hoped he had gotten through. But then Rex's gaze shifted past him, to the phone. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. He turned, staring at the screen still glowing in the dim room. The message was still there. "We know who you are." A cold chill crawled down his spine. Rex let out a slow, guttural growl. Not at Daniel this time, but at the phone itself. Daniel's fingers trembled as he reached for the device. The second he touched the screen, another message popped up. "You have 5 minutes." His vision blurred. He felt his pulse in his throat, hammering like a war drum. 5 minutes for what? Rex didn't move. His muscles were still coiled, but his growl had ceased. He was waiting. Daniel's mind raced. There had to be an explanation, some rational reason for all of this. But the puzzle pieces weren't fitting together. Rex was supposed to be a retired war dog trained to protect, not attack. And yet, this wasn't random aggression. It was a test. A memory surfaced. Something he had read when researching military working dogs. Some of them weren't just trained for combat or bomb detection. Some were programmed with behavioral triggers. Daniel's stomach twisted. Was that what was happening now? Had something, some sound, some unseen command, activated Rex? His fingers hovered over the phone screen. He wanted to reply, to demand answers. But the fear in his gut told him that whoever had sent the message wasn't looking for a conversation. The floorboards creaked beneath him. The house felt smaller now, suffocating. The weight of the silence pressed down on him, heavy, oppressive. Then, car engine. Daniel's head snapped toward the window. Headlights washed over the driveway, illuminating the room in harsh, flickering shadows. Someone was outside. And then the realization hit him like a freight train. The message wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. Rex tensed again, but this time it wasn't aggression. His ears perked, his body lowering into a defensive stance. The dog wasn't trying to kill Daniel. He was protecting him. The pieces finally locked into place, but the picture they formed was even worse than Daniel had imagined. Whoever was coming wasn't here by accident. They had sent Rex to kill him, and when that failed, they were coming to finish the job. The engine outside cut off, and an eerie silence followed. Daniel's breath was shallow, his hands trembling as he gripped the phone. His pulse pounded in his ears, and Rex remained low, his body tense like a loaded spring. The dog's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Daniel, as if waiting for him to understand. The message had given him 5 minutes. That meant whoever was outside had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Daniel cursed under his breath, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no way to defend himself, except Rex. But could he trust the dog? A sharp knock echoed through the house. Daniel flinched. "Mr. Calloway," a voice called, smooth, almost casual. "Open the door. We know you're in there." Daniel's throat went dry. He didn't recognize the voice, but something about it sent a deep, primal fear through him. Rex growled, his fur bristling. His body remained low to the ground, but his gaze never left the door. That was when Daniel noticed it. Rex wasn't just aggressive. He was focused. He knew exactly who was out there. The knocking turned into pounding. "Last chance," the voice warned. Daniel's eyes darted around the room. The windows? No, they'd see him. The back door? Too far. His thoughts were chaotic, but instinct took over. He crouched beside Rex, hesitating for only a second before placing a trembling hand on the dog's back. "Rex," he whispered. "Help me." The moment the words left his lips, something shifted in the dog. It was subtle, just the faintest change in his stance, a flicker in his eyes. But Daniel felt it. The door exploded inward. A masked figure stormed inside, a gun raised, sweeping the room in an instant. But Rex was faster. He lunged, a blur of muscle and teeth, colliding with the intruder before they could react. The gun fired, a deafening crack, but the shot went wild, embedding itself in the ceiling. Daniel scrambled to his feet as the man screamed. Rex's teeth clamped onto his forearm. Another figure rushed in, a second gun in hand. Daniel dove for the first intruder's dropped weapon, fingers closing around cold steel. The second man raised his gun, eyes locking onto Daniel. Rex let go of the first intruder and, in one fluid motion, launched at the second. The man tried to fire, but Rex crashed into him, sending them both to the floor. The gun clattered across the hardwood. Daniel didn't think. He acted. He grabbed the fallen weapon and turned it on the first intruder, who was already staggering to his feet. "Don't move!" Daniel shouted, his voice raw with adrenaline. The man hesitated, cradling his injured arm. But Daniel could see it. He was calculating, weighing his chances. A groan from the floor. The second man struggled beneath Rex, whose teeth were bared inches from his throat. The man wasn't moving, not with Rex pinning him down. The first intruder took a step forward. "I said don't move." Daniel tightened his grip on the gun. His hands were shaking. His heart felt like it would explode. The man exhaled sharply, then lifted his hands. "All right," he said. "All right." Rex stayed perfectly still, waiting for Daniel's next move. Daniel didn't know how long he stood there, gun raised, body trembling. Sirens wailed in the distance. A neighbor must have heard the shot. He swallowed, forcing himself to think past the adrenaline, past the terror. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The intruder smirked, blood dripping from the bite wound on his arm. "You already know." Daniel's stomach twisted. The message, the warnings, the way Rex had reacted from the beginning. It all made sense now. Rex hadn't attacked him. He had been testing him, seeing if he was worthy of trust. And now, in the face of death, Daniel knew he had passed. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed outside. The intruder didn't resist as Daniel stepped back, gun still raised. Rex didn't move, his body a wall between Daniel and the men who had come to kill him. Within moments, officers flooded the house, weapons drawn. Shouts filled the air. The intruders were pulled up, handcuffed, dragged away. Daniel barely heard any of it. Someone touched his shoulder, and he flinched. A female officer, "Sir," she asked gently, "are you hurt?" Daniel blinked, his mind still catching up. He looked down at his shaking hands, then at Rex, whose golden brown eyes met his. "I'm okay," Daniel said, and, for the first time, he believed it. In the days that followed, Daniel found himself thinking about Rex more than anything else. The attack had shaken him, but what lingered wasn't fear. It was something deeper, a realization. Rex had known from the beginning. The way he had watched Daniel, tested him, and reacted to unseen dangers. It had all been leading up to that night. The dog hadn't been unpredictable. He had been prepared. Unlike Daniel, Rex had never doubted the threat. And in the end, it was Rex who had saved him. Sitting on the back porch, Daniel ran a hand through Rex's fur, feeling the rough scars hidden beneath. He thought about the life this dog had lived before coming to him. War zones, enemies lurking in the shadows, loyalty forged through fire. A soldier, even now. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching at some distant sound. But this time, when his gaze met Daniel's, it wasn't suspicion or doubt. It was something else. Trust. Daniel exhaled slowly. He had been given this dog, this protector, without knowing why. Now he understood. Rex hadn't just needed a new home. He had needed someone who would listen. Someone who wouldn't ignore the instincts honed by years of survival. Daniel thought back to the message, to the men who had come for him. This wasn't over. Whoever had sent them was still out there, watching, waiting. But this time, Daniel wouldn't be caught off guard. He looked down at Rex. "We're in this together, aren't we?" Rex thumped his tail once against the porch. Daniel nodded, a small smile forming. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. The war dog had chosen him. And no matter what came next, he knew one thing for certain. He was ready. If you enjoyed this suspenseful tale of loyalty, instinct, and survival, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories. What do you think really happened that night? Was Rex sensing something deeper? Or was there more to Daniel's past than he realized? Drop your theories in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more gripping stories like this, turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Trust me, there's plenty more suspense and mystery coming your way. Until next time, stay alert, because sometimes the ones who watch over us know more than we do. See you in the next story.